Welcome to the second episode of our podcast series, Diversity Brewing Inclusive Conversations, proudly presented by the CII Center of Excellence for Leadership and Voxen University. I'm your host, Madhulina Das, and I'm thrilled to guide you through this enriching journey exploration of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. Our podcast aims to reunite various stakeholders in fostering a deeper understanding of the diverse tapestry that defines our society. We advocate for an equity and inclusion mindset that fosters environments where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute to holistic growth. In today's episode, titled Inclusive Leadership Toolkit Lead with Impact, we are honored to be joined by esteemed guests Dr. Kakuli Sen and Mr. Chandra Doraiswamy. With their wealth of expertise and insights, we delve into the essential components of inclusive leadership and its transformative impact. So grab your favorite cup of tea, settle in, and let's embark on this illuminating journey together. Over to you, Dr. Sen.
Thank you so much, Madhulina. You do a fantastic job every time to get it started. Thank you so much for this beautiful start. And welcome to Mr. Chandra Doraiswamy and all those who are listening to us. We are today talking about inclusive leadership. So I will begin my talk with the most obvious question, Mr. Doraiswamy, that what is inclusive leadership? And what are the common misconceptions about inclusive leadership? These days everybody's talking about it, but is it possible for everybody to become inclusive, or is it that we assume ourselves to be inclusive, and we hope that we are being, but we are seriously probably excluding people or things? So I would like to understand from you, Mr. Doraiswamy, what is inclusive leadership to start with?
Dr. Sen, what a great question to tee off today's podcast. Inclusive leadership. Inclusive leadership is nothing but having the ability to lead a diverse set of individuals, and you're able to respect their unique characteristics without bias.
Okay.
For example, I will take this example from Ramayana. Mm-hmm. Lord Rama goes on this journey to live 14 years in the forest. That was a command that he obeyed. He goes on this journey. Rama comes from a very princely background. So there's a lot of privilege. Born with I don't know if I should say born with the silver spoon or born with the golden spoon. Nevertheless, when he embarks on this journey, he becomes one with everybody on this journey. A few characters that I would like to remind people is first Shabari, an old lady who was there in the ashram, and she was waiting for Rama to come her way. And every morning she would pluck fruits from the tree. She would taste them. She doesn't want to give Rama a bitter fruit. She wants to give him a sweet one. And Rama accepted that. Look at you coming from a very princely, noble background. And there you are accepting a fruit from an old lady who's already tasted it. Doesn't stop there. On this journey to finding his wife Sita, who was kept imprisoned in Lanka, right? He meets this old bird, Jatayu, who's witnessed Ravana kidnapping Sita. And he bravely fought despite his age. But then Rama was able to give him his last rites and thank him for giving the direction, showing him the direction where his wife was taken. Next, he met somebody called Hanuman, a half human, a half animal kind of a character. Then there was a beautiful friendship that was forged. He also collaborated with Sugriva in the Kishkinda Kanda, where the entire army of Sugriva joined hands with Rama in search of Sita. On this journey, there were small creatures like squirrels that also said, we will come and help. We will move those little stones to build that bridge to the Ramasetu to Lanka, right? And Ram got everybody on this journey. So an inclusive leader is somebody who gets everybody on the journey, who respects everybody's individual characteristics, traits, their strengths. And then there's a purpose of this journey, and he aligns everybody to walk on this purpose and to succeed. So this is a beautiful example from our own Purana. I have a little statistic to share with you on inclusive leadership. Research shows that organizations that have inclusive leadership have 70% more chance to expand in new markets. They're 36% more likely to outperform on profitability. And they have 19% more chances to be higher on innovation and 75% more successful when launching products. This is absolutely important for anybody who's in the leadership to be inclusive, because you're able to build new relationship, not just with your customers, but you're also able to build new relationship with your partners, with your suppliers. Eventually, you're able to retain more people and you're able to attract the best talent out there in the market.
So, Mr. Chandra, I think that was a fabulous analogy that you gave of Prince Rama, as I may say, and how he went into the forest, and then he kind of, embraced all who came into his journey of long years, and how he was able to, and those beautiful examples that you gave of the half monkey, half human, and the squirrels and the shabari, and each one of them brought something or the other and had their own strength, and how Lord Rama was able to make use of those strengths, make them feel part of his giant army that he built of all with all kinds of soldiers. So how do you think this happened? Because was he trained to become an inclusive leader, or was it his personality that he became an inclusive leader? How does one become an inclusive leader? What are the toolkits that go into it?
If you look at Rama's characteristics, right, he was humble to start with. Every leader who wants to be like Rama, who wants to emulate his behavior, need to be extremely humble. He was born with a golden spoon. But then he came down, he interacted with people. There was a friendship that he struck with people who didn't even look like him. Look at the cultural shrewdness. Because Rama comes from a different place, whereas he's traveling through the forest. People of the forest have different cultures. They have a different upbringing. And look at him, who was able to understand those characteristics of people. That shows the cultural intelligence of Rama as well. He was able to collaborate, be it the army of Sugriva, be it Hanuman, or be it Bibhishana, who eventually came and fell at his feet and said, what my brother has done is wrong. So he was able to acknowledge, he was able to bring everybody on this journey towards truth.
Right.
And he had the courage. He faced a lot of challenges along the journey. And wherever he made mistakes, he was able to say, I made a mistake. I wanted to rectify. And there were other rishis and other spiritual masters who also came along the journey, who gave Rama the courage, saying, you're on the path. Yes, you're doing well. Continue.
Right. So as I see that probably Lord Rama was already, his own personality wise, he was already a very humble person, and he was probably groomed for becoming a king who has to listen to everybody, who has to be sensitive to everybody's needs and expectations, and also be aware of what the strengths could be, and how he could make use of those strengths and make them feel part of this. But not every leader will be a humble leader, will not be an inclusive leader. So do you think there is statistics or there is any data to say that being an inclusive leader is actually good for business, good for organization? So maybe you could throw some light on that.
Absolutely. Let me just refer to a piece of paper where I've written down the statistics. 70% when inclusive leaderships are there in an organization, there's 70% more chance for the organization to expand in new geographies. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge number. For example, you take a startup or you take any established organization, they all want to expand in newer geographies, improve their revenue, and reach out to more customers, right? So by having an inclusive leadership, we're able to do this. And 36% are more likely to outperform their profitability. Mm-hmm. And they're able to report 19 to 20% more of innovation revenue. Not just that, 75% of them are more successful in terms of new product introductions in the market when they have an inclusive leadership. There's an absolute business sense to having inclusive leadership.
Fantastic. So why do you think, some of the leaders may not be that inclusive? Because definitely they are not, and that is why we are talking about it today. So what are the misconceptions that people may have about inclusive leadership, and what challenges there may be to become one?
See, many times people have a diverse leadership team. A diverse leadership team may not be an inclusive leadership team.
Mm-hmm. No, please, what does that mean?
For example, you have 6 people sitting on your board.
Right.
And these people come from diverse backgrounds. But then it just becomes a top-down approach. But you need to have similarly these diverse people and inclusive environment throughout the organization for everybody to stay aligned. If you're only going to have a diverse leadership right on top and rest of the organization is not going to be that way, then the organization is not going to be working the way you want.
Right. I think another point that I would like to add here is that even if you have diversity in the leadership team as such, it should not look like it is a tick in the box that you have people from different backgrounds, you have from gender, it should not look like that. It should look like it is one in thought and action. It is together in what they are doing and saying, and that is what will become the culture of the organization, and not just a tick in the box that okay, you need to have as many people in this from this community or from this gender or from this representation and so on. So it should be felt, not just seen. So I get it. Yeah. Oh, great.
Absolutely. And many times people also think that inclusive leadership can't be taught. It can absolutely be taught. Many of the learning modules first tackle unconscious bias. That's where exclusion stems from. That's where people tend to exclude people or build policies or products that only caters to the minority. And the third misconception that I have come across is when people focus on a particular minority, they probably think inclusive leadership is all about dealing with minorities. It is not just dealing with minority. It is making your organization accessible to everybody, making your products accessible to everybody, taking your products across different markets. So inclusive leadership has so many advantages that it brings to the table.
Right, you're right. When you say inclusive leadership, that does not really mean that you only talk about minorities, because in that case you're already excluding some other people. By just wanting to include some people, you are already excluding people, because you're not really wholeheartedly going into the inclusion process. You are just identifying different people, different groups, and you're just trying to make representations on that. However, even having after done that, you still may be excluding people. That's a wonderful thing to talk about. So, but why do you think leaders are not becoming more inclusive? What are the challenges that they are facing, and why is it difficult to become inclusive?
Lack of awareness, I would say. Let me just highlight a tweet that was posted yesterday by the CEO of Ola, Bhavish Agarwal. And he got trolled for it. What did he say? He actually went on LinkedIn and he used the generative AI to write a short piece of text. And that corrected him, that inserted a gender neutral pronoun in his text. Instead of he, him, it ensured that it was they everywhere. And he got furious. He took a screenshot of it, posted it on LinkedIn, saying that a pronoun is an illness. And we don't want this pronoun illness to percolate into India from the West. A lot of these people who are highly educated, passed out from institutes like IIT, are unaware of the basics like gender and sexuality. When you are unaware, when you go around and say things that are irrelevant, that create phobias, you are going to create a toxic culture.
Right.
Not just him, there are other brands who have done that as well in the past. and they've all learned their lessons from people who are observing the brand, who are giving them feedback. Feedback is good, but we all need to be humble to take those feedback and say, yes, I apologize, I made a mistake. I'm using this opportunity to correct myself.
You're right, because today we are living such public lives, and anything that you say or put out is everybody can look at it, everybody can comment on it, everybody can make an observation, and it's very easy to maybe praised as well as trolled for it. So you need to watch out. And I think that sometimes it has a lot of disadvantages, of course, but it has some advantages as well. Because if you are, as a leader, putting out a thought, and people who are following your brand, people who are consumers of your brand may think otherwise, and it can hurt your business. And I think a while back you gave statistics on how it can impact your businesses. So if leaders don't understand this, if the leaders take their consumers for granted and their thought processes for granted, it may have an adverse impact. So that's something that needs to be one needs to be aware of. Now, talking about impact, I wanted to understand, Mr. Duraiswamy, that all this talk about being inclusive and overcoming your own biases and including people, identifying their strengths and identifying their contributions, appreciating it, etc. How do you think the one you said that the biases and the unawareness, lack of awareness, etc. are some of the challenges? I'm sure there are more. We can talk about this. But what else do you think people could do to understand that their inclusivity is going in the right direction? How do they measure that they're practicing with the right kind of leadership and it is working in the right direction?
There can be so many things that, Peter Drucker said, what cannot be measured can't be improved. So if you really want to create an inclusive organization, you should measure.
Right.
Inclusion does have metrics. For example, one of the metrics that we use is employee engagement scores. Mm-hmm. How engaged employees are in the organization or how disengaged they are in the organization.
Okay.
You can, if you have a zero discrimination policy and you have a hotline where people can call in and report discrimination or harassment at the workplace, you can look at those statistics to see how many people have reported in. Next, you can look at your exit data, number of people who are leaving the organization, what kind of feedback are these people giving? And then use that as an opportunity to see what can be done to improve.
But generally, Mr. Duraiswamy, people do not give honest feedback while they are exiting the organization. So that become a drawback,
Fear of retaliation. And many organizations have a role to play in terms of eliminating that fear of retaliation. Rather than having their own organization members do the exit interview, if that can be outsourced to an external agency that can objectively do that and don't have to reveal employee names, but just the feedback that comes in, that is much more valuable to the organization. Rather than going and checking out what your people are saying on Glassdoor or any such platforms, it is really good that you give them a year when they're still in the organization.
Yes. I think that makes a lot of difference because while they're leaving, while they've decided that they will leave and on their way out, there are a lot of emotions. So some of this could be emotional as well. I think there needs to be a mechanism within the organization where we are able to open up platforms of open expression and without any fear of retaliation. I think that culture that needs to be developed, and that will possibly address a lot of issues and challenges of workplace that most organizations face on a regular basis. Great. What other challenges do you think are there in the inclusive leadership that you were talking about? Why are leaders not inclusive?
See, many a time they want to say the right thing. they just want to say it, they don't want to do it. Either they don't have the time or they lack the commitment. So every person working in the organization want to see their leader walk the talk.
Right.
In one of my earlier organizations, when I organized the Pride March, I told my leadership, I want all of you on the front line, wherever you are across the world, I want you to be leading this march. And I don't want to see you just talking, but I want you to do the walk. That makes a big difference. The other thing is, a lot of bystanders are there in the organization or any society. What are we doing about these bystanders? How are we going to enable them to speak up? How are we going to enable them to stand up? So the organization and the leadership has a lot to do in terms of getting these bystanders to be much more active standers rather than passive bystanders. Lack of accountability is the third point that I'd like to bring about. Many times when we talk about DEI, it is very nebulous, but then that has to be on the business strategy. That has to be on the KPIs and the KRAs that you measure across the organization. It should be everybody's responsibility. DEI is not the responsibility of the HR or the CEO or a set of individuals or people managers. Everybody in the organization should have that as a responsibility in their key responsibility areas, and they should be pulled up and they should be asked questions. What have you done to improve the diversity and the inclusion in the organization?
Absolutely. I like that point very much when you say the bystanders. I think nobody addresses that particular component or the group of the organization or the society. I think bystanders are those who are very critical factor. If they could be turned either way. They could be brought in, or they could easily walk out of the entire setup that we are talking about towards inclusive organizations or inclusive societies. I think that's a very important point, that efforts need to be made towards making these passive bystanders into active people who start by understanding what we are talking about and then made to be feel a part of it, and then gradually they also start contributing, and not just contributing, they also start kind of rallying about the cause as well. That's the progression that we should look at. So I think that's a very important part that you brought in. And so those were some. Are there any more challenges that you were talking about? I have one question in my mind, that while leaders do all of these things, what is the reward for the leader to become inclusive? Somebody who's not inclusive and somebody who is inclusive. How does that inclusive person remain motivated to be inclusive? And what should keep him or her going in that context?
That's a great question. There's a need for continuous learning, because any change management, for example, you will need to show what good and bad behaviors are. You will need to reward and recognize people who have really done well. So when you have an organization where you have a transparent, open feedback culture, anybody in the organization should be able to walk up to the CEO and give a feedback saying, we love this about you, or put us a post-it note on his or her wall in the organization saying that you've done a fabulous job, we really like this really touched me. Most of the organizations, the conversation happens to be only one way, from the CEO to the employees. The conversation doesn't happen the other way. Once you open that to happen organically, not just through feedbacks and surveys, but sporadically, people can just walk in, give your feedback. You're just sitting on a coffee table, having conversations with people. When you have that kind of a connect with people, you will be able to see that rewards your hard work as well. Well, reward can be measured in multiple ways. As a CEO, they're being measured in terms of revenue, they're being measured in terms of profitability, they're being measured in terms of innovation. I've already shared some statistics to show that inclusive leadership actually benefits all of that.
Well, that brings another very interesting point to my mind. When you say that the CEO should be available to everyone, then sometimes it doesn't stop at that. That you walk up to the CEO and say thanks, or say appreciate something, or bring up an issue or something like that. While that is appreciable, but at the same time, do you think it can create a little ruffle in the entire system? Because there are hierarchies in the organization, and they are there for a reason. When people start jumping the queue or jumping the hierarchy, that can create different kinds of issues in the organization. So while it is good to be able to walk up and have these open door policies, and be able to speak to anybody and everybody in the organization, but at the same time, that could be disruptive to the entire workflow in the organization in terms of decision making, in terms of accountability and responsibility. What do you think about that?
I would like to bring this topic of high context and low context culture. India, for example, Erin Meyer has written a beautiful book called The Culture Map, where he talks about different cultures in the world and how people behave. Right. India, for example, is a high context culture. India and Japan, they belong to the high context culture. When we mean by high context culture, there's so much of hierarchy that is involved. A lot of communication are implicit, they're not explicit. But then today's generation wants that transparency. They want that accountability. They want that accessibility. They want to be able to share things in real time. If you're going to depend on the hierarchy in the organization to get that information to you, a lot of this is going to be lost in translation. Agile organizations have today, a lot of organizations are also doing pulse surveys randomly. They don't do it once a month, once a year employee surveys. They do it once a quarter. So they're able to get a real-time feedback of what people feel. And even CEOs have access to those surveys. So they are breaking down silos and hierarchies in today's culture to ensure there's more collaboration, there's more participation, and there's more inclusion and belongingness.
So I would like to put up another question, that when you say that today's generation is wanting more accessibility, is wanting more quicker feedback and more accountability, more openness, more transparency. But today's workplaces are not only about the younger generation. It has multi-generational workforces. So you have people while you have people in their 20s, you also have people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So that, and whose expectations may be very different from each other, whose comfort level could be very different from each other. So when you say that, we need to look after the current generation's expectations, what happens to the other generations' expectations who are also in decision-making powers or positions and who have bigger responsibilities in the organization? How do we make sure that we are able to cater to all of these age groups or seniority and still be able to manage and do well?
Just like how CEOs break down their customers by audience, by demographics, by age group, by country, because you'll have to be, when you want to take your products internationally, you'll have to be culturally relevant.
Absolutely.
I'll give you another example where they went to South America and they named a particular car, but they didn't realize that particular word meant something else derogatory in that culture. So you'll have to be culturally conscious and demographically conscious for you to be able to tap into every generation that works in your organization. There are some people who would like emails, communication. There are some people who would like to hear audiobooks, for example. So as a CEO, we really can't go with one size fits all approach. We may have to break that down to what works for a particular audience and how can I use that space to interact with them, engage with them, and get their feedback.
Okay, great. And I would like to ask about, you did talk about lifelong learning. Leaders also need to be, continuously learning. So those aspiring leaders or those leaders who are wanting to become inclusive, what is your suggestion to them? What is there that they must start learning, or they must start doing to open up and become more inclusive in their thoughts and deeds?
Before I go into that continuous learning part, let me just share another example.
Sure.
H&M in South Africa in 2015 launched a campaign, an advertisement campaign. They had this black child in a sweatshirt featured on the campaign, and the sweatshirt said, "The coolest monkey in the jungle." And this really backfired. H&M quickly apologized, pulled out this campaign, and they ensured that their teams are a lot more inclusive, diverse, which means there should be continuous learning that is required. My first suggestion to inclusive leadership is be a part of DEI conclaves and conferences. Don't think DEI is only for a set of people who are running those responsibility in your organization. Remember, DEI has an impact on your revenue, your profitability, your growth, all of that, which means you need a seat on the table and you should be there as a part of the audience learning. Second, widen your definition of what diversity and inclusion means every year. Traditionally, in Indian organizations, when you think about diversity, diversity is only gender diversity. They don't know anything beyond that.
Yes.
There's so many other forms of diversity that is out there. And they will, every inclusive leader will have to educate themselves. Go sit in those conferences. Go learn. My third recommendation would be a mentor to somebody who you're not familiar with. You've never interacted with them, or you've not been a part of their community. There are a lot of benefits of reverse mentoring that you will get. Mentoring is not about giving them advice. Mentoring is about hearing them, understanding from where they come from. And then I would suggest them organize hackathons, because you're going to do anyway feedback and surveys in your organization. That is going to point some blind spots. Organize DEI hackathons in your organization where people can collectively come together and provide solutions.
Right.
And last but not the least, recognize and celebrate your own small victories and employees who bring those small victories to you as well. That makes a lot of difference in building a very inclusive and appreciative culture.
Those are good points to start with. I think those are very important because it's very important to celebrate those little victories, because they keep you going and they keep you motivated. And one small victory could lead to another, and others could also get motivated. Like a while back, you talked about the bystander thing. I think the more they see that little things could also be rewarding, and that's how I think they will get also motivated and encouraged to join the talk and be able to contribute to it. That was a great conversation, Mr. Chandradurai Swami. I think we've learned a lot out of this, your experience and your strategies. What is that one, last question that I have is that, what is your one call to action that you would like to suggest to people who would like to become inclusive but don't know where to start? He or she may not be a leader, maybe one person, and just wants to make some change in their lives so that their minds open up and they are able to think more inclusive in a more inclusive manner. What is that one call for action that you would like to suggest on which we could end?
Absolutely. I would say take a session on multiculturalism. In my earlier organization, every people manager had an opportunity to sit in a course that talked about multiculturalism.
Okay.
Erin Meyer's book, A Culture Map, was actually taught to us over 2.5 days. We were taught about what it means to be in a high context culture versus what does it mean in a low context culture, and how do we interact, because today we all work in global teams.
Yes.
Leadership is global, it is not local anymore. So which means you will have to understand people at the other end. Just like how we say in relationships, love language is different across individuals. Similarly, the inclusion language and inclusive leadership is different across leaders and their organizations. So we need to be able to be out there and say, these are my inclusion languages. And what is it that I need to do to constantly improve? My second suggestion is, please be a mentor. You may have been successful in life, you may have passed out from Ivy Leagues, but you may not know everything. When you happen to be mentor to people from underprivileged or marginalized backgrounds, you learn a lot about what you've not read in books.
I agree. And you have to be there, and you have to be out there completely and open to new things that are happening around you, and constant learning. I think that's the final thing that we would like to take with us, that you need to be open, you need to be available, you need to be wanting to learn and wanting to make a difference. So I think, thank you so much, Mr. Duraiswamy. This was a great learning. And going by what you said was that it is possible that all of us can become inclusive. There is a sense to become inclusive, and there is a high possibility for all of us to become inclusive. And you suggested some of the ways to do it. I hope our listeners also get a flavor of that and try and practice some of these. And if there is something that they would like to learn more, there are more episodes that will come up, and we will do more of such talking. And we are also available for discussions to make a difference, to make make the workplaces, make the society more inclusive in thoughts and actions. Thank you so much for this fabulous episode once again, and wish you a great day ahead.